What's going on, YouTube? We're back at it for another video, and today we've got that burning hot love for Pyromania. I'm talking about that smelling napalm on the front line, putting out that cookout. We're telling you right now, we've got nothing but Terminid served up, char-broiled on this one. We've got the best Pyro loadout inside of Helldivers 2 right here. And when it comes down to applying the burn, we've got more than a few options for us, but let's get started with the stratagems you'll need to build out this Pyromaniac loadout. Starting out first, we've got the Flamethrower, which right now is definitely the #1 support weapon when it comes down to facing off with the Terminid, as it has the capability of basically destroying any bit of the crowds. The only thing that it's actually weak against is Bile Titans and the Bile Spewers or Nursing Spewers, the Bloaty Bugs. Those seem to be the only one that are a bit resistant, but even then, we have the capability of taking down Bile Titans with this if we have the capability of blowing off that back armor, and then all we'll need to do is just aim over the shoulder towards that exposed weak spot, and the Flamethrower will take them out fairly quickly. But beyond that, it is perfect for taking out chargers. It is so easy, even the charger behemoths are just getting melted by this. All you'll need to do is aim that Flamethrower towards the kneecap of any one of the legs on that charger and sustain that fire for just a moment or two. Sometimes even within 1/5 of the entire tank, you'll be able to burn out that charger in no time. But say that charger is a little bit too close and you didn't end up taking them down, do maintain consistency with the same leg with that Flamethrower. You do not want to switch the Flamethrower over to a different kneecap. You just want to make sure you're hitting that very top point of that leg just below the point that they have available right there, and keep maintaining that Flamethrower on that one leg, and you'll be melting them down in no time. On top of that, it is perfect for crowd control. It is melting just about every Terminid besides those bloaty bugs, and one thing that is a tip to throw out there is it does have the capability of setting the ground on fire. So in a moment when you do have a possible bug breach waiting on the napalm to come in, or if you just have a large group of hunters and ticks that may be approaching, maybe even the brood warriors, if you just light up the ground in front of you and start backpedaling a little bit, you'll actually be able to ignite those targets and take out hunters and ticks very easily. You won't even need to touch them with the Flamethrower. You can actually focus your Flamethrower on the larger targets such as the hive guards and the brood commanders, while the rest of that flame on the ground is going to be able to take out the rest of those smaller enemies. It's a bit of a power play, and it definitely is something that fully enhances the capabilities of the Flamethrower. The Flamethrower is an absolute powerhouse, and you just cannot go wrong with using this against the Terminid. And it is the centerpiece of the Pyro build. Coming up right after that, we've got Eagle Napalm Strike, which, thank goodness, this has finally gotten buffed. There's been so many different buffs to this one, and it is finally shining. This was the first Eagle stratagem that I unlocked because I thought this was going to be just extremely powerful against the Terminid back in the day when the game first came out, and it couldn't have been any more underwhelming. If you were there back when the game first came out and you tried this, you know it was just something that looked really cool, but it absolutely did nothing. But now it is burning out just about every one of those bugs. You drop this on a bug breach, buddy, you're getting a ton of kills. You can even rack up to 60 in just one go. And one of the best ways to utilize this is as soon as you see that bug breach, if you've got stun grenades, throw those stun grenades for those first enemies starting to pop out. That way, when it comes down to the call-in time, that napalm is going to glide on top of each one of those enemies, getting that initial impact, blowing those up. And this is one of the ways that you can take out some of those bloaty bugs, is that initial impact is going to have some explosive power to it, so it will be able to blow them up, as the napalm itself will only soften up those medium-type bugs. But the longer you're able to hold them in that, the more damage they're going to sustain. But anything from a tick to a hunter to a brood warrior, these enemies are going to burn up almost instantly as soon as they come in contact with this. It is quite powerful, and it is going to be burning through them very efficiently. And it'll give you the capability of truly controlling those smaller enemies that'll be coming out. You'll be able to stop large hordes of hunters coming out. There's nothing worse than that moment. Having a pack of those just descend on you is almost a death sentence in and of itself, especially if they fully surround you. You're stuck on the ground after trying to dive and you just knocked into one of them. They'll just peck your eyes out so quick, it's painful. But being able to burn those out and save the team from that type of struggle is going to be a huge benefit to your overall reinforcement and morale. And we've got 3 uses of it, so it's going to be very easy to maintain that lock on bug breaches or being able to close off certain choke points where you may have a large portion of bugs descending upon you from. Coming up right after that, we've got the Shield Generator Pack, which this is going to be a benefit to our overall survivability. Since we are using the Flamethrower, we're getting up close and personal with a lot of these bugs, and more importantly, chargers. And now, if you didn't know this, the Shield Generator Pack can actually help you survive a charger's crushing blow. You may have noticed in certain instances where it feels like you're a little bit ahead of that charger, but as soon as you see those front legs go up, next thing you know, you're completely crushed. There's nothing more frustrating than that moment, and it doesn't even seem like you're getting hit by the box. It almost just looks like it stepped on your toe, which I suppose that is enough force right there to basically immobilize you completely. But with something like the Shield Generator Pack, you'll actually be able to absorb that hit and keep moving and survive those moments, especially since we'll be up close and personal with chargers most of the time, just trying to focus on that kneecap with the Flamethrower. This is something that could be a huge benefit, and even bigger benefit when it comes to dealing with something like those hunters or even the bile spewers. It'll help us from stopping getting slowed and overall just increase our survivability tenfold while using this type of pyro build. And coming up last, we've got the Orbital Railcannon Strike. Now, you may be wondering why I didn't say the Flame Mines, and I'll tell you right now, you can use the Flame Mines, but overall, that's going to be if you're just going fully deep into the maximum pyro build that you can possibly imagine. But when it comes down to creating the best pyro build, we're going to need something like the Orbital Railcannon Strike, as this is going to give us the capability of being able to deal with Bile Titans. Every time you use Orbital Railcannon Strike on a Bile Titan, it will immediately take off half of its health, and it will blow off the armor on the back of that Bile Titan. Sometimes it'll even take it out in one shot, depending on the positioning of your destroyer. But the important part is being able to take out that back armor and then finish off that Bile Titan with a Flamethrower. It is going to be a 1-2 punch, and it is going to be very quick in certain instances. Now, in the instance that you may want something that is a bit more consistent when it comes to the orbitals at taking down Bile Titans on a much shorter cooldown, the Orbital Precision Strike can be a powerhouse for this purpose. But in general, if you do end up with one of those modifiers that ends up causing the orbital stratagems to scatter, this is not going to be something I would highly suggest. Even though the Orbital Railcannon is a orbital strike, it doesn't end up getting affected by the actual scatter, so that one is always going to be pinpoint. So the Railcannon Strike ends up being the one that's going to be the go-to no matter what. But if you'd like something that has a bit more consistency with uptime instead of waiting that full 3 minutes for the Railcannon Strike, the Orbital Precision Strike is a good alternative. On top of that, when it comes down to alternative stratagems that you could use if you didn't want to use something like the Shield Generator Pack or the Railcannon Strike, say you had some teammates that were effective at just dealing with the heavily armored targets and you wanted to focus yours entirely on crowd control, Orbital Gatling Barrage paired with the Napalm is going to be a power play, as soon as you strike with that Napalm and then throw Orbital Gatling Barrage on top of that, it is going to be something that staggers those enemies caught within the Orbital Gatling Barrage, keeping them stuck in that Napalm, consistently sustaining that burn over time. And this is going to be pretty powerful when it comes down to taking down medium type enemies, especially those bloaty bugs. This can be that powerful combo to really compensate for that one weak spot we have when it comes to crowd control for this build specifically. But on top of that, it's also softening up those enemies, gaining that burn effect on top of it, and just compounding the damage with a very low cooldown on top of that. So these two combined can be up very often, and it can be a powerful combination to lock down any one of those bug breaches or objectives you may have. On top of that, if you want a little bit more of that burn for it, Orbital Laser is an option as well. It just has a high cooldown. On top of that, it will only have 3 uses, but if you're looking for a little bit more of that burning hot love, Orbital Laser is something that can be pretty powerful at taking down the crowds and being able to take down chargers and Bile Titans. And say you're not the fan of the Shield Generator Pack and you want a little bit more crowd control, you can't go wrong with using something like the Guard Dog Rover, as it will increase your overall kill count by the end of the match, but at the same time, it is a benefit to controlling those crowds, taking out enemies, and overall further increasing your survivability. Unless it ends up lining up sight with your head, which still can be pretty painful. But now let's move on to the primary weapon and armor. And when it comes down to the primary weapon for that Pyromania, it's all about the Breaker Incendiary. This is the #1 weapon right now when it comes down to the primaries for facing off with the Terminid, as it's perfect for crowd control, it's perfect for dealing with medium type enemies, and it just has that burn effect on top of it. It is a huge benefit to you. You can just literally spray in any direction and kind of just tag some of those enemies at a distance, and it just clears those crowds out super efficiently. Now, if you wanted to change things up a little bit, you can't go wrong with something like the Punisher, or possibly even going with the Scorcher, but overall, especially for the Pyro build, the Breaker Incendiary is the #1 in my personal opinion. And if you're feeling a little froggy, the Tenderizer isn't too bad when facing off with the Terminid. When it comes down to your secondary, it's all about your personal preference. The Redeemer is one of my better options, but at the same time, I have found a new love for the Bushwhacker. It's something that can end up one-shotting any one of those Brood Commanders and can liquefy Brood Warriors if you're landing all 3 shots at the same time. It can be a good time. It does have a few uses to it, but overall, the Redeemer is going to be a little bit faster at being able to clear some of those crowds out. But it's all up to your personal preference. And ultimately, you may be better benefiting from the grenade pistol in this moment if you're looking to close up some of those bug holes, as we don't have much when it comes to the capability of taking those out with this build. Unless you're choosing certain grenades that have the capability of being thrown down those bug holes. Now, when it comes down to the grenade, I generally go with the stun grenade. This is perfect for being able to throw that directly into that bug breach that's happening, or just slowing down some of those bugs, and then being able to toss in the napalm to make sure that I'm getting the most impact out of that napalm, destroying every enemy before they're actually able to advance on my team, or at least disperse to the point where they'll actually be able to get outside of that napalm quick enough to not be damaged by it or destroyed by it. But if you're looking for the maximum burn, you can't go wrong with the Incendiary Impact or the G10 Incendiary. Both of these are going to be a powerhouse and can extend outward a little bit more of that burning effect on the ground. Generally, I'd use the Flamethrower for this, but if you've got some small spots you just need to kind of touch up with a little bit more of that flame to cover certain angles, you can't go wrong with the Incendiary. And I'd say if you are going with these Incendiary grenades, this is something that can help out with closing up those bug holes as well, if you don't end up having that grenade pistol as your secondary. But you also can't go wrong with the G16 Impact to deal with some of those bloaty bugs, as this will be something that can help clean up those moments if you're dealing with those in a large amount. When it comes down to your armor passive, I would personally choose something like Medkit. We are playing with fire here, so we will catch ourselves on fire quite often, and in those moments just dive to the ground. That's going to be the best way to put yourself out, and more than likely we'll be using stims quite often, so increasing our overall survivability with something like the Medkit armor passive is going to be a huge benefit to us. And I feel like I need to state this, I always wear heavy armor, but there is a medium and a light version of the Medkit armor passive. The specific thing that I'm talking about is the armor passive. Attached to this, you do not have to wear the heavy armor. By all means, use whichever one that you'd like. I just prefer the heavy armor. It looks better to me. But in general, the Medkit passive is probably the top tier for this build specifically, unless you're using something like the Democracy Protects, where 50% of the time you just don't die. You just can't go wrong with that one. It's my second favorite. But overall, the Medkit is just going to further increase our overall survivability with this build and help out with those moments where we will have to stem from catching ourselves on fire. But that's going to be the burning hot love of Pyromania build right there. The best Pyro build inside of Helldivers 2 right now. Fire may not have been the strongest route back at the beginning of the game, but it has truly overcome its weakness in the past. They've buffed it to the point where it is extremely viable now, especially the Flamethrower. That thing is an absolute powerhouse. #1 when it comes to facing off with the Terminid. And it is just an absolute good time. It is just melting through everything. It's a good playstyle. It has its drawbacks, and hopefully in the coming future we do get some type of armor passive that may give us a resistance to it, similar to what we've seen with the arc weapons. And that way we can have like full-on fire loadout builds where there's 4-man team of just burning everything out when it comes to facing off with the Terminid. I would love to see that in the coming future, or maybe even, you know, I know there is possibly a mech coming in the future with a Flamethrower, but I'd like to see a Flamethrower turret or a Flamethrower guard dog on top of that. That would be really cool in the coming future. That would just add more to this type of build. But I'd really like to see the Pyro build get enhanced in the future, but it is pretty much right where it needs to be right now, and it is a ton of fun. Charbroiling every bit of that Terminid out there. But let me know what your ideal Pyro combination is when you're facing off with the Terminid. And on top of that, I've got plenty more of these meta loadouts coming in the future, so hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot of content to make on this, as well as some of that Elden Ring content coming up here in the future. There's plenty more changes on the horizon for Helldivers 2, so the content's never going to end. And if you'd like to see some of this content live, hit that link down in the description. Follow me over at Twitch. We'll be streaming daily. And on that note, have a good one.